King Arthur, Legend of the Sword is directed by Guy Ritchie and stars Charlie Hunnam as Arthur Pendragon. And we follow Arthur after Arthur's father, Uther Pendragon, is murdered by Arthur's uncle, Vortigern. He's in hiding until one day he comes across a mysterious sword stuck in stone named Camelot. And once he pulls this sword from stone, he starts his quest to kill his uncle and take back the throne that is rightfully his. Now this is classic Arthurian legend with King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, as well as Merlin, mages, Mordred. All these characters from Arthurian legend are in this film, but it has a newer twist to it with Guy Ritchie's style. Yeah, for those who have not seen a Guy Ritchie film before, films like Sherlock or Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, they have very eccentric and likable characters, as well as very frantic action and a lot of jump cuts in them. And after watching this movie, I can say that Guy Ritchie's style does not mesh with the Arthurian legend at all. This movie was a train wreck from start to finish. Guy Ritchie's style is more akin to films such as Sherlock. That film really worked, but in a fantasy world, it just did not work. Let's take a look at Lord of the Rings, for example. The things that sold us on the fantasy world in Lord of the Rings were the sweeping shots of armies fighting each other, as well as these very large sweeping shots of Middle-earth. But in this world, we don't really get any of that. Instead of the large sweeping shots, we get shaky cam close-ups of all these actors fighting, and it doesn't really set up the world well at all. And the jump cuts didn't really work for me either. A lot of people are saying they did, but for me, they really detracted from the story. They worked in a film like Sherlock Holmes or Sherlock Holmes' Game of Shadows, two films that I really enjoyed by Guy Ritchie, because that is how Sherlock Holmes' mind works. He is constantly changing subject, trying to figure out a case, and that works for that film because that reflects how Sherlock thinks. But in this film, they use it to show how Arthur is telling stories and whatnot, and it just doesn't work.
It didn't work. It did not work.
Now, I will say the one thing in this film that did work for me are some of the performances. None of them were bad. None of them, however, really stood out either. I mean, with actors like Djimon Hounsou, Charlie Hunnam, Aidan Gillen, Eric Bana, and Jude Law, you're gonna get good performances no matter what. But none of them could elevate the film any higher than it is because none of them had any character development. By the end of this film, they were in the same exact places, basically, that they were in the beginning. The CGI sequences in this film are very clearly CGI. With a budget of $175 million, the CGI should not look as bad in this film as it did. Now, not all the CGI in this film was terrible. I'd say it was about a 60-40 mix of very good CGI and very bad. But again, with a budget that high, it should all be absolutely stellar. Especially when you have actors like Charlie Hunnam, Djimon Hounsou, Jude Law, Eric Bana, Aidan Gillen. Even though they are in high-profile shows and high-profile movies, none of them are really A-list actors, so you're not going to have like a Robert Downey Jr. moment where he's asking $40 million to be in a single film. So a lot of that budget could have gone to the CGI, and it didn't really seem like a lot of it did. And as I said earlier, this film is a fantasy film. It took a lot from other fantasy films, but none of the stuff that made those fantasy films good. It was almost as if in this film they said, hey, people like the giant elephants from Lord of the Rings. Let's put in giant elephants. Hey, Gondor and Helm's Deep looked really cool, so what would happen if we put the two together? And that's what Camelot's gonna look like. And while I get what they were going for, what they missed was that in fantasy films, we need to see the world. We want to see these big, sweeping action shots of armies battling each other. We do want little moments with our characters within those battles as well. We focus on them within these fights, but we also see the bigger fight going on around them rather than in-camera stuff of just them. And really, in that regard, Guy Ritchie and the producers of this film really missed the mark. And even within the Arthurian legend, there was a lot in this film that really suspended disbelief for me, and I just didn't buy into it half the time. Notably at the end when it comes to stuff that happened with the mage and stuff that happens with Arthur's father. You'll see what I mean if you see this film, but don't go see this film. This film was a complete train wreck from beginning to end. I hated almost everything in it, and I'm gonna give King Arthur, Legend of the Sword a D-. And the only thing that really saved this film from being an F was that I liked Charlie Hunnam as King Arthur. He was likable, even though he wasn't given anything in this film. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. Have you guys seen King Arthur? If you haven't, don't. But if you did, what did you think? Comment below and let me know. And if you guys like this, you can like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye for now.